Hi, welcome to your relationship roadmap. We're here to help you have exceptional, authentic and fulfilling relationships. My name is Keith Flynn and I'm here with Michael Worthington to kick off this channel to give you an idea of what's going to come up in videos in the near future.
I must admit, Keith, I'm pretty excited about this particular channel because we know, and we live in Perth, West Australia, we've got lots of challenges with fly in, fly out workers, we've got children involved, and I think, knowing you for a little while now, and you said you want to do this channel and you said I want to do a bit of an intro, and I thought a bit of a personal background on yourself, because I think a few people look at someone like, and you get a really positive results with the people you work with. And sometimes people get that impression that, well, your life must have just been all warm and rosy and fuzzy and you've never made any mistakes in relationships. Maybe you could just tell the folks a little bit about what your journey's been like.
So, first of all, one of the main reasons I'm doing this is I had a failed marriage. So I was in my mid-late 20s and I decided that I wanted to get married and have a family. So the idea was son and a daughter.
Right.
Own our own home. I even built a picket fence.
So you mapped it out.
Mapped it all out.
Yeah.
Had it all there. In fact, if you go on Google Maps, you'll still see the picket fence that I built. So the picket fence lasted longer than my relationship.
Oh dear, we shouldn't laugh, but you know, I wonder how many people out there can go, oh, me too. I get that. Yeah.
So I fell in love and we got married very quickly, and my wife actually had a daughter. Right. So my daughter was about 2.5. So I still treat her as my daughter, but one of the areas of conflict was that my family treated my son and my daughter differently.
Ah, yes.
So I've had a lot of experience in terms of doing everything that you shouldn't do in relationships.
Which probably helps you a lot.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned is love's not enough, because my wife and I really loved each other, but we just didn't have the tools and the knowledge and the skills to make it work.
It's an interesting comment you make that you found out love isn't enough. How many couples do you find along the way who go, look, we love each other, Keith, and we don't understand why it's not working?
Look, that's probably one of the most common things and one of the saddest things I see is people really love each other, but they've just run out of options to make it work. They just don't know how to make relationships work for them. So generally they'll get to a point, and unfortunately they get to a point of crisis where one of them or both of them are looking to leave before they do anything about it.
Wow, it gets to that point. It's interesting as well, you said then about your children, and I, you know, from someone observing other families, I've been married for 30 odd years, so I'm surviving, I'm doing quite well, I'm happy. But I do notice in other families, children, I know this is a huge passion of yours, is this passion to help the children, give the children a voice, because you've seen and seen how your children were affected or what they experienced through that?
Well, actually, it's not about how my children have been affected.
Right.
The sadness here for me is that I don't even know where my children are, and I don't have any contact. So I would always send them a birthday card or a Christmas card. But the funny thing was, I actually learnt from my wife's first husband that they'd actually moved away. So I actually don't know their addresses or their phone numbers.
Oh, wow.
So for me, part of my driver is to make sure that this doesn't happen to other people. Working with people, what I've observed is that people play out the patterns, typically what they've learnt in childhood.
Right.
So for example, if anyone comes to me with an affair, one of the questions I'll ask is, have either of your parents had an affair? And typically the answer is yes. So children learn about relationships from their parents, not what people say, but it's what they do.
Right.
You know, if parents are arguing, guess what? You're teaching your children to argue.
Is this what you mean on your course? Because obviously this series of videos here on this YouTube channel is going to be giving people little bite-sized insights and some really good strategies. But your full program's got like over 40 strategies starting at that and really comprehensive. is this where it starts to try and get the parents to understand that that child doesn't have a voice and you're teaching it things and you just not realising what you're teaching your children?
Well, yeah, as one of my mentors would say, he only ever works with 3-year-olds.
Wow.
Meaning that it's the 3-year-olds inside the adults that he's working with. Because sometimes you'll have, in families where there's young children are more responsible than what the adults are.
Right.
Because young children are more present, they're more aware. The most beautiful age of a child is between the ages of about 2, 2.5 and 5. A child there will always just look at what they do have,
yes,
not what they don't have. A young child will go, if parents are arguing, a young child will go to the cupboard, pull out a Band-Aid and say, here, this will fix you.
Right.
While parents are caught up in their own world, in their own pain,
Yeah.
and not knowing the impact this is having on their children.
Right. When you said it, and you said like young children is dealing with the 3-year-old inside, is this why sometimes when you deal with the younger generations, I'm talking the young 20-year-olds that are suddenly getting into relationships and they become uncertain whether they've got the right partner, is this also connected to when they grew up as children? Is it all interrelated?
Well, perhaps that's not so much interrelated. I mean, we all go through different stages in life.
Yeah.
See, typically 20-year-olds are bulletproof.
Yes. We are, or were, should I say.
They're out there to experience life and party. So, like, if you think about, like, there's one model which says, like, if you break life into 7-year cycles, so like 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, 21 to 27. So the 21 to 27 is when you're starting to move into the settling down stage.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And then the 28 to 35 is typically when people are having families.
Right.
So in terms of when one of the patterns I see when couples get together, like they might get together, it might be high school sweethearts, or they might get together in their early 20s, they're going through this 7-year change of life, growth phase if you like, and sometimes one of those people, typically the guy, is still caught in being a 21-year-old, partying, doing his own thing, whereas his wife has now got the children, has settled down, like he's not adjusted to what family life is. So that's just one of the patterns that I see.
Is that when you talk about on your program, you say that typically the guy, and we're not trying to be sexy, but typically the guy gets into that and doesn't even know he's got his family, he's going, oh my goodness, I don't know how to become a family now, I've got this, and they struggle with it.
Exactly, because, for example, if he's grown up in a traditional family where mum's at home with the kids and dad's out working and going to the pub, he's just following that pattern. So yes, in part it is, but also you've got different stages of life. And sometimes people don't adjust to those stages of life, and they just, basically everybody's running on autopilot with their unconscious if they don't do something about it.
Interesting you say they don't do something about it. I've heard you use the analogies quite a few times that in marriages that it's like, and I think the analogy one of them uses is servicing your car.
Yeah.
You don't run your car for 10 years. Well, you asked me and I joked and said I'd give it to my son because it'd be wrecked.
Yeah. So one of the things when I'm talking to people, just so we put it in context, is I ask people if they have a car, and I say how often do you service it? And they'll often say, once or twice a year. I'll ask them, when was the last time you had your relationship serviced? When was the last time you had someone check in on your relationship to see how you're going? And if you don't service a car for 10 years, what's your car going to be like?
As I said, I give it to my son. It's finished. It's wrecked.
So that's just one side of it. Because the other thing is that people don't learn about relationships. They don't educate themselves about what relationships are about. People will spend more time on studying for careers, planning holidays and planning weddings than they will actually studying relationships. So my question there is, would you, like for example, if you want to become a crane operator, do you just walk up and climb to the crane and start playing with it. You have to have some training.
Yeah. You're saying that if they're not doing this, and you said an interesting word, you said people go on kind of autopilot. Is this a phraseology we hear sometimes where the lady or the guy said, well, you just take me for granted? Is this because they've just gone, well, I don't see anything wrong, we're just cruising, aren't we?
Well, this comes into a body of work that, if we look at our mind, where one of the models that I've got, and it's on the free resources there, you can have a look at. We've got our conscious mind, our unconscious, and then we've got the primitive mind.
Right.
So the primitive mind is where we are in survival mode, so that is fight and flight.
Yeah.
So when people in relationships get stressed, they'll get into fight and flight mode. Okay. And that part of their system will take over. Now, our unconscious is about depending on the research you do, is somewhere between 87 and 95% driving our life.
That's a big chunk.
Yeah. Consciously, we're only something like about 5 to 13%. It's like you'll see people who want to lose weight.
Yes.
They'll go on a diet for a certain period of time, then they go off the diet, so they go through this yo-yo thing, because that's the unconscious kicking in, or people trying to give up smoking. Right. So we've got all these unconscious habits that are going on. Okay. And when people get stressed, they'll typically reboot back to a default situation. Okay. And the older people get, and the longer you're in a relationship, the more the patterns are playing out, and people are putting up with stuff. So,
Keith, you're saying there about they go on autopilot. You use the analogy for servicing your car. So, is this like saying to people, look, you may think your marriage is fine, but it's still a good idea that through your relationship still to have checkups and tweaks and make sure it is fine and someone isn't being taken for granted, or you may just be going drifting and not realising you are because you're both busy with life.
Yeah, correct. So I had a recent call from someone who was actually contacting me because she's been in a long-term relationship and she's thinking about having an affair.
Oh, wow.
And she doesn't know why.
Okay.
So there's going to be some unconscious driver that has her thinking about another relationship, and she's saying everything is good. Well, this is why I'm about having, authentic, exceptional, fulfilling relationships. Because the longer you go in a relationship, the more things start to get into a rut and into a routine.
Right.
So it's about taking a fresh look. Now, what people don't do when they get into relationships is actually define the relationship that they want to have. People typically will just get into a relationship and then expect it to work, just like their parents did. It's like if you want to build a house, you don't just buy a block of land and start watering it and expect it to grow.
No.
I literally had someone thinking that, I'm waiting for my relationship to work and be happy. No, you've got to work at relationships, but you've got to be clear on what you're working on.
You're talking then about the lady with the affair. Now, another thing, or thinking about having the affair, not understanding why, and not being sexist again. But quite often we find because the ladies do look after children at home, and then they go through this must be a horrible phase where the children are leaving, and they're kind of going, well, where's everything gone? I know even when our kids grew up, my wife was saying, well, I've got all this time on my hands, I'm a bit lost, almost. Is it important that men realise this I know we have stay-at-home dads, but predominantly ladies I'm talking about. Is it important that the men realise this, and how do you help that transition there? Is this a good time to have someone come in and help people go through that change?
Well, it actually doesn't matter what the issue is in the relationship.
Right. Okay.
Like we want to get the foundations laid.
Yeah.
For example, if you're looking to build a house, do you want it to be single story, 2-story, or 3-story? Depending on what sort of house you're going to build, you need to make sure you've got the foundations that support it.
Okay.
So all that happens as people start relationships and move through like time and whatever, if they have the right structures in place to support it, create the right dynamics, then you're not going to end up with those situations. So it's not male or female, because sometimes women can lose themselves in a relationship.
Yeah.
Sometimes men can lose themselves. So for example, if we go a little bit further, when men retire, you know, they've been working all their life for their family, and then suddenly they retire and they've got nothing to do.
Yes.
Now, the wife has actually been used to the man being away most of the day. And all of a sudden, he's home all the time, and he's not working. So again, when we look at relationships, it's about forward thinking.
Yeah.
Like, think where you want to be in the next 1, 2, 5, 10, 15 years. What do you want things to look like in retirement? But it's about defining the type of relationship that you want and putting in place structures to support that.
It's quite interesting listening to when you start talking about some of the dynamics, some that we know but we don't, if you understand what I mean. Yeah. A lot of people go, oh, I recognise that, but they've never actually thought about it for themselves. No.
So if you like, my mission has been to simplify relationships, to create simple models for everyone to understand it. And that's why I call it your relationship roadmap. Yes. So I take people on a journey. And with the simple models, they actually understand what I'm teaching them. It's just that no one's put it together in this sort of package before to make it really easy to understand, easy to follow, and all you got to do is do some work.
You said also that a lot of people, I can understand why, it's almost a crisis point when they come to you for help. But do you find that along the way people can start to recognise some warning signs that perhaps they can come to you a little bit earlier and make it a little bit easier?
If they did, they would have.
Yeah. Would have, could have, should have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, again, in terms of communication, often people have the same, like, if you like, communication style. So often one person, now it could be the man or the woman, could be saying, look, there's a problem, we need to go to counselling. The other one's going, no, everything's fine, because they feel and think it is fine. And then it takes to the point going, well, hey, actually I've had enough and I'm ready to leave, before the other one wakes up.
And says, why didn't you say something earlier?
Exactly.
Yes.
Someone once said to me that God first sends you a feather and then a brick. But it's the Mack truck you got to watch out for.
It's the Mack truck. Jeez.
So there's always signs and indicators, but people aren't aware of it because they're caught up in their own worlds.
Yeah.
And typically that's been what they have experienced or what they've been used to in their own family relationships.
You say, obviously people get to that stage and they want to contact yourself. And a lot of people who've never done this before are maybe going, I wish there was someone to talk to. But there must be sometimes that hesitation, like they don't know what's going to be expected. Are you just going to suddenly turn up? What's going to happen? What's it like when someone contacts you for the first time? What are some of the steps you like to take them through to kind of ease them so they're comfortable and they get the result that they want?
Well, look, it's really quite simple. When people contact me, I always believe in having a chat first before I even book a session. So I like to chat to each party independently. Now, because people are at crisis point, typically they are desperate.
Yes.
So I just open, like, what's going on? Hi, what's going on for you? And generally people share what's going on for them. And I have a chat to them. I say, well, look, I'll have a chat to your partner. Now, this could be 10, 15, 20. The longest I think I've gone is about an hour. So this is really just to hear what's happening in that person's life, where they're at, because there's always two sides to a story.
Yes.
Then what I do is invite them to come in for a session. And typically that session is 5 to 6 hours.
Wow. So you don't. See, a lot of people just say, look, I'll just beat you for 30 minutes or 60 minutes. But you believe it takes a little bit longer and a bit more caring and understanding.
Well,
the hours.
In my experience, in the early days, I used to do some shorter sessions, and I can think of a couple where I had back-to-back and they were like 2 hours. And we got to the point where I had to say, sorry, I've got someone coming, and that was at the point where we needed to continue.
Right.
So I did them a disservice, and
Yeah.
it didn't feel good for me, and they felt crappy and I felt crappy because we couldn't continue to actually work through what we had just hit.
Mm.
Also, often people in a relationship, one person is more active and one person can be more resistant. I'm not saying it's men are more resistant, sometimes there can be women that are resistant as well,
Yeah.
but it takes time, for particularly for the male ego, to sort of come to grips there's something to be worked on. So it takes time for people to warm up and open up.
Okay. And I guess it's all these experiences you've had, and people are now starting to realise the quality. And that's why I wanted to explore that a bit. I just wanted people to get to know you, because that's what these videos are going to be taken from, all your experiences, giving a little bites. All right, it's not a full session for you, but those people that I think gives them advantage as well of watching these videos is they're able to understand what they're going to get on this online course. Now, I'm a big fan of this because I just think there's so many people who are maybe a little bit shy or like to work at their own pace or get some exposure before they come to see you. Are these bite-sized chunks in this video series you're going to be doing on this channel going to give them a taste of what they can really get on the program?
Yeah, I'm going to give bite-sized chunks. There'll be strategies. There'll be different topics that we'll talk about. The advantage of the program is this program simply works.
Yes,
it works.
Yeah,
and I take people on a journey. And the content in the program is exactly the same content that I cover in that 5 to 6 hour session. In fact, there's a little bit more content in there because I've been able to put it into the videos, because I sort of tailor it to couples as we go along.
Yes, yeah.
Now, just go back a little bit to give you the process that I go through and see how this fits into context.
Yeah.
So someone will contact me, I'll call them back, we'll have a chat for however long it is. Sometimes I have both people crying on the end of the phone because they're that distressed. And they just need to be heard. They need some support.
Yeah.
Then when we book in the 5 to 6 hour session, it's 75 to 80% content, because we've got to create a structure within which to look at the issues that are going on in the relationship. The other day I had someone come to me and she'd actually written out 6 pages she wanted to share with her husband. So she's there, she brings them out, and it's like, can I tell him now?
Can I tell him now?
Okay, no, we've got to put this into context. But all she wanted to do was be heard and tell him.
And he'd just be totally overwhelmed, I suppose.
So I asked her to save it till the end, and as I worked through it, and as we worked through the program, what actually ended up was that night, because we'd gone through all the structure and we put things in place, she was now comfortable to go home with him that night and share them. So that's how much shift we had in that session. So when I'm talking to people on the phone, I'll say, look, this is how the session is going to run. I'm going to ask you right at the beginning of the session to tell me what your issues are. What you want to get from the session and what your issues are. And then I'll tailor it inside of that framework. But the content and the strategies are all the same.
Right. Through your years of experience of doing this and being able to really help couples, at the end of the day, what is it you think you really bring to the table for them? Why are you so successful in what you do? I mean, I've read some of those emails. You know, ladies saying, I couldn't talk to my husband, and after you, we've got our marriage back. And there's hundreds of the things like that. What is it, Keith?
One of the biggest challenges in relationships is people aren't being heard and understood.
Right.
What I do is really listen. Also, I don't judge or criticize people. I accept people as being right in their own worlds. It's just that they're not understanding each other. So part of the session is to help people understand themselves and understand each other.
Right.
Now, it's quite common in a session, and it's virtually just about every session, that particularly the woman if she's having problems with her husband or partner, within an hour or an hour and a half or even 2 hours, she is thinking that the stranger knows me better than my husband who I've been with consistently for 5, 10, 15, 20 or 30 years. That's what I bring. And that's a skill that everybody can learn.
Yeah.
I call it listening with your heart. It's about slowing communication down and really listening to the other person. And when you can start to say things that are on their mind that they haven't said, they feel really understood.
Do you find the same happens with the guys? We don't want to stereotype people, but as you said, your guys, I won't speak from my generation, we seem to be a little bit more resistant in sharing what's actually going on inside. Is it the same skill set you've got with them? Because they open up to you as well, and thank you. You know, it's not just a one-sided thing. It's both male and female.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because often people just don't know how to communicate.
Right.
They don't know how to open up. They don't feel safe.
Fantastic. This is going to be a really, really exciting channel. I do want to, and this is only a personal thing because I've seen the workshops you've got online, and what's the bit, how can they have a look at those work? Obviously, watch these videos and subscribe here, but how do they have a look at the actual program itself, the online programs you've actually built? I love those.
Right, well, I mean, if you have a look in the link below, that'll link you through to the actual website. The website's really quite simple. It's called yourrelationshiproadmap.com.
Yeah.
And that will give you an overview of the program. I don't have any snippets there. It's if you like it, you buy it. I mean, use this channel to get a taste of what's in the program.
Yeah.
But the content on that, I keep stressing, the content on that is exactly the same content as I go through with the couples where I do these private intensive workshops.
Yeah, absolute extension. And I love the name, Your Relationship Roadmap, giving you exceptional, authentic and fulfilling relationships.
Changing your relationships forever.